You've landed at the edge of what medicine has known and what it's becoming. I'm Dr. Richard Rocker, and this is the Integrative Continuum, a podcast bridging biology, energy, and human potential. In each episode, we explore how quantum biology, frequency medicine, and ancient healing systems are transforming our understanding of health. This is where mitochondria meet meaning and blood work meets bioenergetics. Subscribe now and join me on the frontier of integrative healing, where science and soul are no longer separate. Welcome back to the Integrative Continuum, the podcast where we explore the space between conventional and integrative approaches to health, performance, and human potential, bringing together different perspectives to understand the bigger picture. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Rocker. Today's guest is Lesley Thomas. Lesley is a money behavior expert, master's qualified executive coach, and the founder of the Money Confidence Academy. She works at the intersection of financial pressure, human behavior, and leadership decision-making, helping individuals and organizations understand how money influences not just outcomes, but how we think, feel, and act under pressure. She is the creator of the Financial Self-Trust Framework and the Emotional Balance Sheet, a diagnostic tool designed to uncover how financial distress can distort clarity, confidence, and judgment, particularly at leadership level. Rather than approaching finance in the traditional sense, Lesley's work focuses on the deeper drivers behind financial decisions, identity, psychology, and emotional patterns, highlighting that our relationship with money is rarely just logical, it's deeply human. She is also an Amazon #1 best-selling author of Parents, Let's Talk Money, and the host of the global top 5% podcast, Let's Talk Money and More, where she explores the wider conversations around money, behavior, and life. And as always on this podcast, I stand by the truth as I know it and as I continue to learn it. Because when we look at health, performance, and how people function in the real world, we can't separate that from the pressure they're under. And financial pressure is one of the most powerful and often overlooked drivers of behavior, stress, and decision-making. So today's conversation is more than just money. It's about how we think under pressure, how we make decisions, and how that shapes outcomes across every area of life. Lesley, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Hi there, Richard. Thank you very much for having me. I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
Excellent. Yeah, really looking forward to this. So Lesley, telling me, how did you get into this space?
Oh, that's a really, really good question, and it's probably quite a convoluted answer. So I'll try and summarize it basically. So I spent 20 years in corporate telecommunications, working across a number of leadership functions, and then when my children were really small, I left corporate not because I didn't like it. It just wasn't really allowing me to be the kind of parent and the kind of wife I wanted to be. So I started working with my husband in his business, which is completely unrelated to what I do, selling ski property in the French and Swiss Alps. I did that for a few years, but it just didn't light me up. Skiing's never been my thing. So I decided to retrain as a business coach. I'd always coached and mentored whilst in corporate, but I didn't have the qualifications that I thought I needed to have. So I retrained as a business coach. I was going to specialize in confidence coaching for women who wanted to move from corporate into running their own business, like I did, or were looking to scale their business and didn't feel they had the confidence to do so. But the more I studied confidence, the more I saw the connection between self-worth, self-value, and that magic word beginning with M, money. And that was my eureka moment. I went to study it in more depth. I became a money coach. I did a master's in executive coaching, and I pulled everything together in terms of my knowledge, my experience, my coaching and mentoring work around a person's relationship with money and how our relationship with money is a mirror into everything else that we do in terms of self-worth, self-value, and how we're showing up in the world, basically. And my deep fascination for the psychology of money has been a bit of a thread since my time at university when I studied sociology and started to understand, how our sociology, how everything plays into our sense of who we are, our sense of our own worth, our own values. And that has just played out into the work that I now specialize in.
Well, that's fantastic. That sounds extremely exciting. Very good.
Love
Excellent.
that.
So when you talk about relationships, what did you start noticing about people and money?
I think that for a lot of people, we think that money is just an exchange for a product, for an experience, for having the kinds of life that we want to have. But actually, it's so much more than that. We have a relationship with money, and that relationship with money begins way, way back in our childhood, not, of course, as a result of our direct experiences with money at that point in time, because usually our relationship with money is set by the age of 7. And of course, we have very, very little direct experience of money at that age. It's based on our parents, our main caregivers, their relationship with money, and how they talk about it, how they behave around it, and how open they are about it. It all gets layered onto how we think and feel about money, but also how we think and feel about ourselves as a result of money. So for me, it all comes back to really understanding the mirror that is held up for ourselves when we're thinking about the relationship we have with money. And is that relationship a positive relationship, or is it a relationship that holds us back because of how it makes us think and feel about ourselves in terms of what we believe is possible, who we think we are, the values that we establish for ourselves, both from when we were younger, but also as we go through our life's journey, into adulthood and beyond. And from all the work that I've done, with my clients, it's very, very apparent that largely our sense of self-worth and self-value is based on money, how much we have, how much we don't have, how much we think we can or can't have. And that all ties back to how that relationship started when we were very, very small children.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So just like different physical type of traumas, I suppose you could say there's kind of financial trauma. 7 years old is a very impressionable time. And would you say that's kind of like a blueprint is kind of imprinted in people? You just carry on
Absolutely.
what you've learned and seen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The number of clients that I've had and also people who I've talked to who have had experiences with their clients in different fields who have absolutely witnessed their ability to run their business, the decisions that they make, around money, about getting into debt, not taking on any form of debt, all goes back to what they experience at a completely different stage in their lives. And when you are able to pinpoint why you feel the way you do about certain things, why you behave in certain ways, you can then actually make a decision. The decision I made when I was 7, what I believed to be true when I was a young boy or girl, and the behaviors now I am demonstrating as an adult are they actually serving me? Is that money story that I've developed a money story that is helpful to the kind of life I want to be living now? Or actually, is it completely unhelpful and it is preventing me from being able to have the kind of life that I want because I'm still talking to myself as though I were that 7-year-old little girl or that 9-year-old little boy, and I'm not able to disconnect between my experience as a young child witnessing what happened to my parents or hearing, the whispered conversations that were going on in the house and my interpretation of what those whispers meant. Because very often the stories we tell ourselves about things that happened in our childhood are just that. They're stories. It's how we interpreted things with our immature minds, with our undeveloped experience, etc. But we carry that through with us into adulthood as something that is absolutely true and is true for us, and we cannot get around what we think and feel about that particular thing. And then that prevents us from being able to move forward beyond that because it triggers us or it
Mm.
brings up trauma for us. It doesn't even have to bring up trauma, it just brings up a bad memory or something, our mum shouted at us for whatever reason, and we've taken that through and we've allowed it to be the driver for our lives, even though we are far removed from that little girl or boy to where we are today as adults.
Yeah, yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, there's so many interesting correlations there with what we do in the clinic here. But I really like what you said about people telling stories. Um, I find I find when I listen to patients, a lot of times you get a story, and that story is often an excuse, really, for not accomplishing what they need to. So if if financial stress equals a physiological stress, is money actually the problem, or is it what it does to people?
I think it's what it does to people, but money has triggered what it does to that
Mm,
person. So it could be the embarrassment. So it could be, when you were younger and, all your friends had a particular make of trainer at school, but your parents couldn't afford to buy the trainers. So you had, a cheap shop brand of trainer and you remember your friends being horrible to you or your classmates being horrible to you because you didn't have the trainers that they had.
mm.
Actually, the truth might have been your parents were not, had the money to buy brand new trainers, but they had a different mindset. Well, the trainers you've got are a perfectly good pair of trainers. You don't need to have the latest brand. So, no, you go off in the ones that you've got because they're good enough. But you could have taken that as meaning, well, hang on, my parents' friends have brought them brand new trainers in this particular brand. Therefore, they're more important than me. Their parents care more about them than I do. I'm not good enough to deserve those new trainers. So you build up a story around the self-worth that those pair of trainers give to you, that sense of self-worth, that sense of being the same, the sense of being less than, or if you had the trainers on a regular basis or the upgrade to, your mobile phone or whatever it might be, you might put far more store. Look how important I am because my parents keep buying me these things. Therefore, I must be better than those people because they don't get those things as regularly as I do. So it's not necessarily the money, it's what the money means to you, the messaging that you're taking from it, and how you are then processing it in terms of how you feel about yourself and the mirror that it holds up to you that you then reflect out onto the rest of the world.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so I suppose with that analogy there, maybe this is why a lot of people maybe live beyond their means. because they're, as they say, trying to keep up with the Jones.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that,
And that is exactly it. It is because very often we we want people to perceive us to be living a successful life. Definition of a success, as we know, varies from person to person, but there's a perception of the kind of house you live in, the kind of car that you drive, how many times you go on holiday a year, where you go on holiday, where you shop, which supermarket you shop in on a regular basis, etc., etc. For a lot of people, they put a lot of store behind what other people think, and they may not be able to shop in that particular shop on a regular basis. They may be putting it onto their credit card on a regular basis, or the lovely brand new car that they have every 3 years to impress the neighbours is actually bought on very, very expensive finance, whereas their neighbour's car, they've paid off themselves, they own that car outright, but the external perception that the person with the brand new car on finance or shopping in the supermarket with the most expensive brands, it makes them feel more important. It makes them feel as though others are looking at them and comparing them favorably, and that gives them that sense of I'm doing I'm doing well. I'm doing well in my life. I am moving forward positively. But in the back of their mind, and funnily enough, I was reading something before I came and joined you this afternoon about a lady who has £45,000 worth of debt. And feels very ashamed about the amount of debt that she has, but she is so caught up in having, as she perceives it, a middle class lifestyle, a lifestyle that her salary cannot support, and therefore has paid for that lifestyle utilizing a credit card. So she has got that duality going on of wanting externally to look as though she's really successful, as she is measuring success, but the shame of realizing that the only way she can have the perception of success, again, as she measures it, is by running up a really big credit card on what some people would say are, frivolities. If you can't pay to go on holiday, you don't go on holiday, you don't put it on a credit card. So it comes down to values as well. What's important to you and the decisions that you make based on those values. But it can be very, very hard for a lot of people to separate the perception of how they want to be perceived from the reality of what they can afford in terms of balancing the perception and how much they actually can pay for the lifestyle that they want to have. And it's only when you start to think about how do I feel about myself? What crutches am I using to make myself feel better? And you will know, through what you do, what some people will do to make themselves feel better from a health perspective. That might be, losing too much weight. It might be exercising too frequently versus understanding what I need to give my body nutrition, what I need to be able to move effectively throughout my life. And it is those extremes, and it's trying to understand what drives those extremes. And when I am at my most extreme in terms of behavior, how is that affecting my life? Is it helping me? Is it hindering me? And what do I need to do to get the balance back? Because how I'm behaving is not helping me. It's making me feel a certain amount of things temporarily, usually, the dopamine hit from going out and buying something. Um, but then having to deal with coming down very quickly when the reality of what I've just done doesn't match up with how I truly feel and want to feel about myself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it really comes down to self-esteem, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's shocking how many people have really bad self-esteem. Like you said, they have to have the most expensive car and things like that. And I think we go through growing stages. I can definitely say when I was younger, I wasn't that money thrift, and yeah, because you were trying to make your impression and who you were, and that. And then when you look back and you go, my God, if I would have saved at least half of that money, I would be in a
And
much different position. Yeah.
exactly. And I think that is the thing. When we are growing up, we have to learn from our mistakes. Nobody really learns from being told by somebody else, don't do this instead. We have to go through a period of of experience, and then looking back and saying, well, actually that wasn't the best way for me to manage my life, but I had a good time. I I've got a hangover, my body's not as fit as it might be, whatever it might be. And to actually go, well, hang on, this is not the kind of life I want to be living. So I can make changes to it. And that's healthy. That is absolutely healthy to make those mistakes, to do the things that you want to learn from when you were younger versus thinking back, I wish I'd saved a bit more money. I wish I'd been a bit healthier, whatever it might be, to actually utilize that experience to then create the kind of person, the kind of lifestyle you want to have. But when your sense of who you are, your self esteem, your self confidence is in a place where you are not able to rationally self coach yourself into understanding, why do I behave in the way that I do? What does it get me when I behave the way that I do? And what do I really want? And in understanding what I really want, what are the changes I need to make to actually get there? Because I think for all of us, when we realize the repercussions of what we have done, that gives us the opportunity to say, okay, I could have made better choices back then. I didn't make better choices then. Why didn't I? What would have happened if I'd made better choices? Okay, so how can I make those better choices now? And when our self-esteem, and I think a really important point here is that when we are children, very often the adults around us don't realize how devastating a throwaway comment can be. You know,
Mm.
do you really want to be having that chocolate bar? Do you really want to be sitting in front of that screen? You're missing out on, on time with your friends. That spot on your face, are you getting pimples and whatever it might be? We actually take that on board as a child and very often make far more of it because usually with my clients, when we go back over their relationship with money and their very first memory of money and the association that they make when they're older, there is usually a single experience that has caused them to think or feel in the way that they do. One single solitary thing that was said to them or they witnessed that they have carried right through until adulthood. And I think as adults, if we actually think, we say sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never harm me. Actually, it is the names that cause the far bigger problem than the physical hurt when it's limited physical hurt. I don't mean, beating anybody up or anything, but we don't realize the power of the words that we use and that gets carried through basically. And we need to have, when our children ask us about, what's that brown envelope, and why are you and daddy talking, all of a sudden talking quietly when that envelope came through the door, or how much does so and so cost, what's a credit card, we should be having those conversations, because not having the conversations causes the little child with a vivid imagination to come to their own conclusion as to what that all means, and then that feeds into misunderstanding, and that feeds into feelings of inadequacy, and that's what turns into there being a sense of lack of self-worth, lack of self-value. So as you quite rightly said there, it all comes back to self-value, because the more we value ourselves, the more we believe in the art of the possible, and the more we can go on to achieve, because we have the confidence to try and to get back up again when things don't work out for us, as opposed to seeing it as just another example of, I never get things right. Things never go well for me. And that is why it's so important to understand our own sense of self in order to be able to make the right choices, to have the right emotions that then create the right behaviors that get us the results that we really want.
Yeah. And I say that can be challenging for a lot of people because in society we're really conditioned by everything that's around us, and now in modern times, where where communication is literally at your fingertips, the phones and the computers and everything like that. I think it's even the pressure is even more than maybe when you and I were kids, as well. And we see that just not with finances, it's with everything. It looks, health,
Absolutely.
like you said, the car, the house you have, and people are really digging themselves in a big hole,
Yeah.
and people expect it as well. I remember I had a couple of people coming up to me, and they said, "Oh well, you're a doctor now. You should be driving a different car or a better car." I'm like, "Why? What's wrong with my car?" you know, it's fine, and I don't know, but I think if you have enough money you don't know what to do with, I think, yeah, great, go buy yourself a toy or a car, or something like that. But let's face it, a car is not the best investment, is it?
And that's exactly it. When you have a strong sense of self, a comment like, well, you're a doctor now, you should be, driving a better car. Why? If your car is perfectly functionable and it gets you from A to B, and it doesn't break down regularly, and it doesn't need a huge amount of investment, to maintain it, etc., why do you need to have, a new car? I always remember being told many years ago, Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, he has never owned a brand new car. And he said, why on earth am I going to buy something that the minute I drive it off the forecourt, it's immediately lost 20%? I wouldn't invest my money in that way in stocks and shares. So why the heck would I do it in something that's going to get me from A to Z? So A to B. So he was well known for, driving around in very old cars, and he's
Yeah.
a multimillionaire. So it is our perception of what having money, having status actually means. And when we realize that, then actually we can do something about it. Is that mindset, is that mentality helping me? Or am I doing it for a different reason? I'm a doctor, therefore I should have a flash car, rather than I'm a doctor and I have a great car that gets me where I need to go. And I think you are right. I think what the likes of social media And the greater connectivity that we have now for being able to view what people are doing, all over the world. When you and I were growing up, we knew what was going on in our neighborhood with our neighbors and friends, and that was the sum total. Our ability to compare, was very, very limited. Whereas today, when young people in particular see, influencers, on their yacht or in their Lamborghini, talking about, the champagne lifestyle that they have. And they're looking at themselves and they feel as though they're not being compared very favorably, and they're never ever going to be able to do and have what those people have. Then all that does is knock their sense of self-confidence further and further.
Mm.
But when you actually have the mindset of, well, actually, if they can do it, I can do it. Because again, this very connected world has allowed us to see there are some very clever, very wealthy business people who have come from very ordinary backgrounds, but have had the self belief to take the knocks, to do the hard work, to dust themselves off and learn when things haven't gone well, and to keep going. If you are of a mind to go, that's the kind of person I want to follow, they can be my role models, because if they can do it, I can do it. That is when you have the greatest chance to enjoy success, because you're coming from a mindset of, they've done it, they've proved it possible, therefore I can do it, rather than stuck in a mindset of, it's never going to be me. I'm never going to be lucky. I'm never going to own my own house. I'm never going to have an income where I can regularly go on holiday, or whatever it might be. And it all comes back to, exactly as you said, our own sense of self-worth and the mirror that we are holding up to ourselves, and then what we're reflecting out to others.
Yeah, so it's really having a stable and a healthy mindset to get you to that place. And it's just it's the same when I'm looking at patients with physical ailments and the likes. There, a mind's you can usually tell when I see people come in. I can pretty well tell in the first minute who's going to get results and who's not going to get results, because you see the mindset right away. And it's amazing. And then you will get some people. Um, I think they like to be sick. For whatever reason, they get attention to it, or this is part of their story now. And I'm sure we see that financially as well, don't we?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I heard, it's fascinating and horrifying at the same time. And I'm sure you're aware of this stat and then the connection to it. So in the UK, we have 1 million NEETs, which are people between 16 and 24 who are not in education, training, or employment. So they're claiming benefits, basically. And there's 1 million of them
Mm.
in the UK. And I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and the person talking said, I was talking to a professor who said, if you give me a child at 3, I can tell you if they're going to be a NEET or not. So at 3 years of age, depending on their environment and their parents, etc., he or she, 'cause I'm not quite sure if it's a he or a she, the professor, they would be able to project if that person was going to be basically on benefits by the time they were aged between 16 and 24. And research has shown that if you have not had a job by the time you're 24, you're unlikely to ever have a job in your entire life. So it just goes to show how important those formative years are. And I am sure, just as you've said, the connection there between money and health will be exactly the same. Because when I was going through my initial training, my coach said to me, how you do money is how you do everything.
Mm.
So I am absolutely sure that if you take somebody who is a NEET, for example, they're not really going to be particularly bothered about their health because they're not really particularly bothered about necessarily their future, because the messages that they have been getting over the years is don't bother at school. School's never served me. Nobody in our house has ever gone to university, so you're not going to go to university. You're never going to own your own home because nobody in our family has ever, owned their own home. And I think that just goes to show that it is to do with, as you said right at the top of the conversation, those people that you surround yourself with, but equally having the ability to ask yourself, is this the kind of life that I want? And if it's not, let's go and find the evidence. Because once you find the evidence, exactly as I'm sure that you do, once you find the evidence that somebody else in the exact same set of circumstances as you has been able to turn around their lives, turn around their health, and get the results that they've wanted to, you have a choice. You have a choice to believe, well, actually, they've done it, therefore I can do it. Or you can say, no, it's okay for them because. And that because to me is the point at which somebody switches off and, as you've said, gives themselves the excuse, gives themselves the out not to do the hard work required to climb the career ladder, set up a business, set up a side hustle or whatever it might be, eat more healthier, understand nutrition, work out the exercise that you need to do, etc., etc. But when you actually compare yourself to somebody else and say, well, actually, if they've done it, I can do it. Because that is what, we want. That is the mindset that we want for people, is to believe it is possible. Because when somebody believes it is possible, I have never coached anybody who has not made possible what they wanted to do when they first came to me. Because it is about getting out what you want to be possible for you, understanding why up until this point it's not been possible, and then what you need to do to actually make it possible.
Yeah. Um, when I work with clients and patients, one of the big things we talk about in order to get healthy is that they're actually internally and externally, that the environment is appropriate for that to happen. And I think from just what you said there as well, financially, a lot of these people have been brought up in that environment where it wasn't possible, or they were never taught it's possible. So how does somebody get out of that situation, um, to improve themselves? I know you said yes, you need to make the decision to do that, but is there anything else that they could do?
I think is creating awareness. I
Yeah.
think awareness is very much the first step, and surrounding yourself, with the right people. And I think, if you look at a book that absolutely massively changed my life was, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Mm.
And what happened to the poor, the poor main character when he met his best friend's father. He was the rich dad versus his dad, who worked hard but was very much a corporate man, didn't necessarily advance himself particularly well, versus the rich dad who took the risks, who did the inner work, etc. And I think it is a case, if you look at some of the most successful people that we have on the planet, they've largely not come from a huge amount of success. They've just had a spark. I interviewed a guy called Charlie Mullins, and Charlie Mullins he set up a company called Pimlico Plumbers, which is a very well-known company in the UK, and they provide plumbing services basically right across the UK. And he came from a very, very poor background. And at 15, he started an apprenticeship with a plumber, basically. And he decided the plumber was very successful. Um, and Charlie decided he was going to do everything that his boss told him to do. Absolutely everything, get up early, change his mindset, start taking on board all the hard knocks, the hard experiences. And Charlie said, I set him up. He became my mentor. And everything he told me to do, I followed to the letter. And, Charlie's background is a very, very, poor background, really, really deprived, basically. Charlie sold Pimlico plumbers about 4 years ago for 145 million. And he basically said, if you ask me the one thing that I did that gave me what I have today is I found a mentor. I found somebody that I could literally do what they told me to do, who believed in me before I believed in myself. But his belief in me, in him, allowed me to go, well, if he can see it in me and he's created this successful business, then I can do the same. And I think that is the message. It is a case of creating a sense of awareness, go and look for the evidence, and then decide for yourself. Is it going to be possible for me? And find that one person that can mentor you, because it could be a teacher at school. I remember my favourite teacher, Mr. Prickett, God rest his soul, because he died earlier on this year. And Mr. Prickett saw something in me that I had not seen for myself. I didn't believe I was particularly intelligent. I kind of thought I was middle of the road. And Mr. Prickett saw something very different and he moved me up to the highest set, basically, at school. I chose to respect his opinion that I had more in me until I believed I had more in me. So, anybody who does not have that self-belief, who does not at the moment, is not doing the things they want to do or are doing the things they don't want to do and want to know how to stop doing them, it is find a mentor. Find somebody whose example you can follow. And we are in such a connected world that it's very, very easy to find the example of people who we want to, whose values match our values. And I'm
Right.
not talking about the finfluencers and the influencers and all of that. I am talking about somebody who is walking a path that you would and that could be because you want to be a top footballer. It could be because you want to run your own business. It could be because you want to be a doctor. Whatever it might be, find that person that can support you on your journey, and together you can work out a route and a plan to get there. And how do I know that's possible? Because that's exactly what I did. Exactly what I did is find mentors along the way to work with who helped me to see what I couldn't see and to learn from the path that they took to get them where they are today.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like I said in my intro, I stand by the truth as I know it and as I learn it, and the learning never stops. And I think sometimes it takes a little bit of self-esteem, like we said before, also to admit when you don't know something, or maybe when you have something wrong, to change that. But like you said, it all starts with awareness. You can't change anything if there's no awareness there.
No.
Um, and then after that, it's just really figuring out, well, hey, what is it that I actually want? And then this is where a coach who's going to help you, whether it's a financial coach, a health coach, a sports coach, um, because they're going to ask you the same thing. Well, what is it that you want? What's your end goal here, right? And then the coach can help you to build that picture. Yeah, that's great. So What happens to people when they're under financial pressure? What kind of behaviors do you often see? Just so people can kind of be aware. Oh, geez, that's me. I better be careful.
Yeah, yeah. So, in what I do now, I work with organizations to
Yeah.
help them to understand how leadership decisions can be affected when financial pressure is basically, in the room. That financial pressure, does not have to be debt. It doesn't have to be bearing down on what is going on in the economy. It could be, a PE-backed organization that has, those who are funding them bearing down, waiting on, the return that they're going to get, etc. And it's understanding how when you are under pressure, how the dynamic in the room changes basically. So it could be, a decision that used to take a week to be made now takes a month. It could be a decision feels as though it was agreed, in the meeting. Yet when you walk away, people are saying, well, what are we doing? Why are we doing that? It was a much, we should have done this. Well, why didn't you speak up? Well, if I spoke up, what could have happened? I could have been next on the redundancy list, or I could have lost my promotion, or, well, you saw the mood that he or she was in. There was no way
Right.
I could say anything because they believed what they were doing, was the right thing. Or people not prepared to even have the conversation, or looking for more data. Look, before I make that decision, we need to have more data. We need to have a report on this. We need to be able to demonstrate why we're going down this particular road, and always looking for an excuse to procrastinate can very often, be the reason, and not having the confidence to actually realize that sometimes we don't have all the information. We don't have all the data. Right now at time of recording, we've got the war going on in the Middle East. We don't know when that war is going to end, how it's going to end, how long it's going to go on for. But decisions still need to be made. And when you are under financial pressure and you're worried about what happens if I make the wrong decision, what will people think about me if I've made that decision and I haven't had all the information, or I haven't had the correct information? How is that going to play out for me in terms of leading this team, being part of that team? And rather than actually saying, okay, this is how I am feeling at the moment, I want to be able to go on record as saying A, B, or C. We hold back. We don't say the things that we want to say. We're not as open as we should be. We kick the can down the road. We act as though we're in agreement when actually everything is screaming at us saying, no, no, that's not the right thing to do. And then that means in an organization, we can create a culture where people don't feel they can come forward, that they can't speak up, that psychological fear is created. And when that happens, the behavior of our team, of our employees, can change to the point that they go into self-management mode,
Right.
looking after themselves, which might mean starting to look for another job. They have one foot in one camp, they have one foot applying for another job. Their productivity levels drop. They start taking on stress, not being able to sleep at night, ringing in sick because they don't feel well, because the stress is driving them in a direction that their health is suffering. So by not recognizing how financial pressure can play out in an organization, and also when that psychological fear is eroded, it can start to mean that people start to make assumptions. Oh, it's going to be redundancies because this is happening. There's not going to be a pay rise. Bonuses are going to be withheld this year. There's not going to be the same opportunities for promotion, etc., etc. They start becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy because people start behaving in a different way. So it's really important to understand when you are running a business, when you're part of a team, when you're leading a team, to understand how pressure shows up when you're making decisions, particularly when that pressure is financial, because what we think is a way of managing the situation, those being managed may feel very, very differently.
Yeah, yeah. It's when I was listening to it's amazing the stories we make up. Like you said at the very beginning, people make up stories continually all the time, which
Yeah.
turn into excuses, which end up really being self sabotage in some form or another. It's and yeah, I've noticed that, when it comes down to it, sometimes people they make excuses, or all of a sudden they don't want to do something. I got to go to the bathroom, or I'll do this or the other. I remember I was at some kind of seminar years back, and it was self development type of seminar, and the whoever was hosting the seminar, he knew exactly how people were going to react. So he goes, "Okay, this is the next exercise," and then he told the door people at the back that to lock the doors, because he goes, "There's definitely going to be a handful of people that all of a sudden are going to need to go to the bathroom, and things like that," because
Yeah.
he's seen it so many times. And he really worked with people and to get through their excuses, and he would just work with them and work with them until they just literally started crying, and until he broke it down. I just think that's interesting how we just continually do that in so many different ways, and it only ends up creating stress for us. You mentioned, stressors, which physically creates a cortisol response in our body. Cortisol is a stress hormone, no matter where that stress is coming from. And we know financial burdens and stresses can do that. Excess cortisol creates inflammation. Inflammation elevates antibodies in the body. And then all of a sudden, you have an autoimmune condition, or you have a disease process that's going on. So, yeah, so it's again coming back to the awareness, and I think this is great that you're helping people become aware of this, and and throughout our talk so far, you've mentioned a lot of times asking the right questions to yourself, and I think that's really powerful about asking the right questions. Is this something that you work with people? Bringing them through a questioning process.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've developed a diagnostic called the emotional balance framework
Yeah.
because, sorry, the emotional balance sheet framework, because in organizations, everybody understands the financial balance sheet. What they don't necessarily understand is how very often decisions are made emotionally, and therefore what the emotional balance sheet is costing an organization in terms of what is going on when decisions are being made. So I have created a 40 question diagnostic that measures 8 areas basically of our relationship with money, financial stress, how we handle that stress, etc. And it's reported back in two ways. One, to the individual, so the individual knows exactly what is going on for them, and then at a cohort, organization level, but anonymized, so that the data is plotted, so an organization can see where the work needs to be done, where the hidden tax, as I call it, can be costing an organization, and then put steps in place to address that basically. But it's done at two levels so that the individual can spot, okay, yes, this keeps coming up for me, not only in the context of work, but actually in my home life as well. Going back to, how we do one thing, we do everything. And that shows up absolutely in terms of our relationship with money. And once you're able to see exactly where those hidden areas are and what they're costing you, then you can actually put steps in place to change it, but not all at once. I never ever recommend to clients that they go and eat the whole elephant. It's a case of choosing, okay, what shall I work on first of all? What is going to have the most benefit the most quickly, so I can then choose the next area to work on, so I start to see the cumulative effect, because that is the important part, is seeing the effect in the round and over time. Because what causes us stress from financial pressure began, right back in childhood. And depending on how old we are now, that pressure could have been going on in one form or another for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So just like when you're trying to lose weight, you didn't put 3 stone on overnight, you can't expect to lose 3 stone overnight. But it's actually taking that step to say, I want to have that level of awareness. I want to understand what's going on for me, how it's impacting me, those areas that actually I'm doing okay at, so I can lean more into those, and then I can choose what I need to do to actually impact those areas that are not serving me so well. And what the diagnostic does, it allows you to look at your top 2 or 3 areas to address, and then take it again in 6 months' time and see how things have changed, and see then how the work has allowed you to create an environment where you feel as though you are making progress, because you are making progress. And then that, of course, gives you confidence then to go and keep doing what you're doing, or tweaking it a little bit if you're not getting quite as big a difference in that area as you would like to. So the emotional balance sheet is there to get people to look underneath the bonnet. It's not about them fixing their personal finances. It's about how the decision making plays into their organization, but the benefits, of course, also impact them personally as well as professionally.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I was just kind of smiling to myself when you were talking, because you operate your business, your clients the same way that I deal with my patients. And I think one of the one of the key factors that I find is an issue is that a lot of times people have never had a proper history taken. So in my work, I do a proper health history, and then when I send somebody, a 25-page form, they almost fall off the chair. But I go, listen, I want to know everything from day one when you were born to present day. I need to know how you got here, the factors that led up to there. I said, you may think there are certain things that aren't pertaining to that, but they might be very relevant to how you've gotten there now. And it's the same thing, yeah. And then digging in, doing comprehensive, testing. Like you said, you didn't get here overnight. This was going on for a period of time, and we need to figure out when was that period of time. Not everything is physical. Some things are mental. Some things are emotional. Some things are traumatic, and I think, yeah, there are so many different similarities there with that, and that's fantastic. And
Yeah.
it's I think it's a bigger issue than people lead on. I think a lot of people, they're having a lot more money issues than they let. Like we said, people are really pretending, um, and that creates an issue. So, so why do you think smart people make poor decisions when they're under financial stress?
There's no one thing, but it comes back to that sense of self-worth and self-value, and wanting to be perceived to have the success that other people are mirroring that they are having. And I think how we compare ourselves, comparisonitis is probably one of the worst diseases that social media, has given us. The
Yeah.
ability to compare ourselves to other people, and to largely, for most people, to feel as though they're coming up wanting. Most people, their ego is such that they will see somebody who is richer, taller, slimmer, bigger muscles, better hairstyle, more hair, whatever it might be, and feel that they are wanting. And I think it's that we have milestones upon which we believe we should achieve certain things. I should have passed my driving test
Mhm.
by a certain amount, have my first car, my first home, get married, have children. It used to be not that long ago that reaching your first million by 60 was seen as something really, desirable. Whereas now, for a lot of people, if they haven't reached their first million by 25, they see themselves as failures. Now, where has that benchmark come from, basically?
Mhm.
It's come from the ability to look at other people's lives, for them to put out an image of what their lives are like, and for us to filter out everything that we have achieved to a certain point and go, well, it's not good enough. I wasn't a millionaire at 25, therefore, I am a disaster, an
Mhm.
absolute disaster. Rather than think, well, actually, I've got a good job, and I've got good qualifications, and actually I am on a path to be owning my own home by the time I'm 30 or whatever it might be. So
Yeah.
we tend to overinflate what we believe is possible for others and undervalue what we have achieved for ourselves. And once we go down that road, the gap tends to get bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of what we perceive is possible for us, and how we regard what we have achieved so far. We start discounting our achievements far more quickly and putting others on a far higher pedestal, not knowing their backstory, not knowing the reality. The guy that is standing next to his Lamborghini, it's not his Lamborghini. He's rented the Lamborghini, or he's just in a hotel car park and
Yeah.
gone and stood next to a Lamborghini. But we believe the story we tell ourselves, but it's how we tell ourselves that story in relation to our own sense of self-worth. He looks about the same age as me. He owns a Lamborghini. I haven't even passed my driving test yet. And then that sets off more sabotage and us really questioning our sense of worth. And when we question our sense of worth, it doesn't usually, for most people, drive us in a direction of action. It drives us into sitting on the sofa, eating a big bag of Doritos, cracking open a bottle of wine or a can of beer, whatever it might be. And then that leads to more self-sabotage because we hate ourselves for getting into that doom loop, basically. So it
Yeah.
is about understanding how we react, and does it matter if it's not driving positive behavior, does it matter the car somebody else is driving? Does it matter the size of house they're living in? If that's driving us into negative behavior, then we've got to stop consuming social media, whatever it might be, that is driving that negative behavior, and focus instead on, what is it I want? How do I relieve my pressure? What is the action I need to take to create a better sense of self-value? Because once you have that, that is when you change your behaviors, and you change your behaviors because your emotions around yourself change, and you take different action, and that leads to the kind of results that you want to have, and they get addictive for all the right reasons rather than the wrong reasons.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent. You just you answered a question I was just going to ask, on why people repeat the same financial patterns over. And it's the same thing in my industry with health. You see people, they do well and they end up back where they were again, because I don't think they even either haven't had the proper coaching, or they didn't have the right mindset yet. And I think it all comes back to that again, what you said there. So again, the value in having somebody help you to coach you through it and help you to build that picture. Because some people, honestly, you ask them what they want, but they really don't know.
Yeah.
And yeah, as I say, if you don't know what you want, how are you ever going to get it?
Yeah. And that is exactly it. I used to deliver a financial literacy program into a school. I didn't deal with the technical part of it. I dealt with the mindset part.
Mm,
And the questions I used to ask the pupils, and they were aged around about 14, 15, and I would actually say to them, what is it you want to achieve with your life? And I used to give them
mm,
several questions about uh, how do you want to be earning money? Where do you want to be living? What do you want to be working? What do you want to be wearing? What are how are you spending your time? And how are you celebrating and thanking the people that helped you get where you are, basically? And initially I could kind of see, well, what's this got to do with money? And if it's got everything to do with money, because you can't do all those
mm,
things if you haven't actually worked out what it is you want to do with money, because money is just a tool at the end of the day. It's a tool that allows us to be leading the kind of life that we want to be leading. And they always said at the end of the course, that was one of the best parts of the course, getting them to be thinking about themselves, because I would give them a 10-year time frame. So in
mhm,
10 years' time, so they'd be 25 at that stage, they'd have done their GCSEs, their A levels, and if going to university, finished university. And then I would say, so actually, all those things you want to do, what is the first step that you need to take to get there? And some would say, well, qualifications. Okay, so how are you going to be feeling on? And whatever the year was, I would progress it forward to August 2 years later, because that's when they'd be getting their GCSE results. How do you want to be feeling on August the 15th, 2026?
mm,
Oh, um, I want to be feeling really excited. I want to be celebrating. I want to be feeling really proud of myself. Okay, so when does that work start? And there'd be a silence. Now, when does that work start? Today. You need to be thinking about how you want to be feeling in 2 years' time today. So when you're messing around in the back of the classroom, when you're saying the dog at your homework, when you're messing around and not doing what you need to be doing, think how is that feeling feeding into how you want to be feeling on results day. And
yeah,
that's when the penny drops, because how the results that we want exactly are driven by the behavior and the emotion that we want to feel when we achieve something. And when we can, so when you, I am sure with your clients, when you can get them thinking about, that day in the future when they can walk around pain free, when they're at the body weight that they want to be, when they can complete the whatever tasks they want to be able to, being able to think and feel in that body, doing those things, getting those results. It's that connection that allows you then to think, okay, so to feel that, I've got to do these things. This is what has to change. And
mhm,
when you can make that emotional connection to your future self, that is when you really can have and make those game changing decisions that says, that is how I want to feel. And now nothing is going to stop me from doing what I need to do. Because if I don't do it, I'm not going to be able to feel as I want to feel on that particular date in time. And I think that shifts the energy. And when you shift the energy, that's when it goes back to you believing in the
yeah.
art of the possible for you.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's great. I think you perfectly described what happens when responsibility increases in the individual. All those positive factors, and again, it's a mindset. Focusing on the right things. Like that saying, you're the sum of the five people you hang around the most. What is the influence that is around you, and whether that's financially or whether that's health wise as well. It makes a difference. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think. I think that's probably the toughest decision for a lot of people when, again, going back to what we said earlier, the environment. What environment are you in, and do you want to stay in that environment? And if you want to get out of it, you've got some decisions to make, right? And
Absolutely.
some people don't like change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most people don't like change, but even more people don't like staying the same. So it is a case of deciding, do you like change enough to not stay the same? Or do you want to be comfortable in not creating change, but actually not actually making any changes to your life for the better? And I think that is the bit to always focus on, is what do I need to do to, and something that always worked, when I first started coaching, and a technique I used a lot was, the 80-year-old coach.
Okay.
And you go up to an attic, and at the end of the attic you can see there's somebody there, and it's very dark and you can't quite work out who it is, and you walk closer and closer, and there's light shining through the window, and then you recognize that that person is you, as an 80-year-old person, and you get the opportunity to talk to that person and say, okay, knowing all you know now, what can I do to have the kind of life that I want to be having?
Yeah.
Because we have all that wisdom. We just choose to use excuses, to use fear, to want to be liked, to choose the easy option, to not change, to continue to be popular for not saying how we feel, as opposed to being unpopular for saying exactly how we feel, to be different to other people, because being successful does mean changing. It does mean new habits. It does mean being disliked by the people who wanted you to be the same as them because it justified their behavior, etc. But when you think about your 80-year-old self coaching you, actually, that's the only coach a lot of us actually need, if we are prepared to ask ourselves the hard questions and be honest when we hear the answers that make us feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, that was really good on helping someone recognize those positive steps forward in themselves. Really, I think that's great. Um, I want to ask you, if there's, I mean, how would I put that? If there's one thing that somebody could change about their relationship about money, what would it be? If you could put it down to one thing.
How does your relationship with money make you feel? And I think it's asking yourself that question. How does your relationship with money make you feel? How do you feel when you check your bank account? How often do you check your bank account? If you're not checking it on a regular basis, why are you not checking it on a regular basis? And that'll come back to how you feel about money. So it is not shying away. It's actually asking yourself that very direct question. How does money make me feel? And when I have asked that question in organizations, when I've asked it with, students, I do it anonymously. So I do it using something called Mentimeter. So they can put, into their phones the answer, and it comes up with a word cloud. And I would say 80% of the time, the words that come out are negative words.
Yeah.
So, scared, fearful, ashamed, want more. It's very, very rare that the majority of the words that come out are excited, empowered, um, all other positive words, basically. So it goes to show that largely for the majority of people, just understanding how does money make me feel, when money is an inanimate object. Money is just, it's just an energy, basically. It is incapable of making you feel anything. You make you feel something. So why does money make you feel in the way that you do? And once you understand what is it, why do I feel the way that I feel about money? Why do I feel it's difficult to open up my app and see what my bank balance is? Why do I have difficulty in talking about money, with my partner? That's one of the main reasons people, break up in a relationship
Yeah.
is because they have a dysregulated relationship together, around money. So if there was only one question I could ever ask anybody about money, which would probably tell them more than anything else they needed to know is, how does money make you feel?
Yeah, 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 that's very powerful. That whole the whole statement you just made there the last couple minutes, it's really relationship between a couple that's intimate is not really much different than money at all. And if you want to attract it, then you need to do the things to attract it, and that's having the right mindset, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's an
Yeah.
energy, and if we're not in that energy, it doesn't come.
Exactly. And I think you're right there. I think, Richard, almost the way to equate it there is, how does love make you feel? How does money make you feel?
Mm.
And both are just an energy. They are not something that you can physically pick up money, but it is an inanimate object. It's not going to be moving around. And the same with love. You can't pick up love and say, hey, this is love. And I think when you think about it in those terms, how does love make you feel? How does money make you feel? When you think about your partner, how do they make you feel? That will tell you all you need to know with regards to, do I need to create change? Do I need to look at that relationship I have with money, the relationship I have with the person I'm in a relationship with? Do I need to change it? And if I need to change it, how do I need to change it? And then what am I going to do to change it? Because the best questions we can ask ourselves are usually the simplest questions. They don't need to be the most intellectual. They need to be very, very simple because they are usually the questions that we avoid asking because they are the most confrontational. So when you ask yourself, how does money make me feel? Not what do I think about money? How does money make me feel? Then that internalizes that question. And then for most people, they will feel it somewhere in their body. And it'll be a sucker punch to their stomach, or it'll be a warm feeling around their chest, or it'll be a tightening feeling. And actually, when you lean into that feeling, that is when you can absolutely go, actually, as much as I've tried to deny it, it's not working for me. I've got to do something about this
Yeah,
because it's at that point that our conscious self and our subconscious self that's not wanted to ask ourselves, how does money make me feel? But once we've asked it, our subconscious and our conscious self suddenly go, shit, I can't ignore this any longer. I've suddenly become aware that this is the elephant in the room. I've got to deal with it. And by dealing with it, how it makes me feel, now I can start to make some decisions with regards to how I'm going to change it so that it allows me to feel better about myself, because what comes up will all be related to how you feel about yourself, because money itself cannot change anything because it's not real, it's an energy. So it's all on you, which is great because it gives you the power. Because very often we give our power away to money. Oh, money's always going out of my bank account. I've never got enough money. Rather than understanding it's your actions that are ensuring money leaves your bank account and not enough of it comes back in. But once we put that responsibility back on ourselves, how do I feel about money? How do I want to feel about money? And what are the changes I can make to ensure I feel like that in the future? then that has got to give us two choices. We do something about it or we don't do something about it.
Excellent. That was very empowering. I'm feeling energized. Like I'm ready to get in there. And I think a lot of people, if they're honest with themselves, that are listening or watching this, I think we have to admit that everybody probably to some degree could use a little bit of help there, especially when we see the amount of financial difficulties, the amount of people living from check to check. Um, I I think I heard something recently somewhere that if you don't have enough money to live, if everything, let's say the war went and you couldn't do
Yeah.
anything, would you have enough money to live for 6 months? I don't know how many people could actually say that they could.
Tiny percentage,
Yeah,
absolutely tiny percentage of people. Most people, as you say, they live from month to month. And a phrase I remember hearing many years ago that made me smile, but also was very serious is, there's too much month left at the end of my
yeah,
money. And for a lot of people, that is very, very true. And whilst we are in a cost of living crisis in so many parts, of the world right now, actually just saying we're in a cost of living crisis and expecting somebody else to solve that problem for us, when actually that means we are part of the problem.
yeah,
We have got, if we know there's a problem, we can do something about it. We know there is a problem right now. So therefore, we have got to get into the mindset of what is it I can do to help myself, to help my family right now? And that might well be pick up the telephone and have a conversation about managing the level of debt that you have, having an honest conversation with your partner that actually you can't afford to have the lifestyle together that you are living right now. To have the conversation with your children who think that you can go on a second holiday this year, that actually right now that's not possible. But we can put a plan together to make it possible that next year we go on holiday. And it's all around the languaging that we use. And that is really, really important. But facing up to our reality and not disempowering ourselves by saying, others, you deal with that problem.
yeah,
And then we'll benefit from it, because actually usually it doesn't work out that way anyway. The ripple down effect doesn't really result in anybody having a better life by simply waiting for somebody else to do it. You have to decide for yourself that you're not going to be a victim, that you are going to find a way through whatever the problem might be, because if others can do it, you can do it as well.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You might not have the money now, but or you could change, "I don't have the money yet,"
Exactly.
and so that's not writing it off right away, it's putting in the future while you're able to work with that.
Yeah.
And when we're saying that, to be able to work with that, um, since you are a financial coach, and the likes, maybe, before we go, you could tell us a little bit more about your programs, your book, your podcast, so that people have a good, information about that. And of course, we'll add that stuff later into the show notes as well.
Okay. So my book is called Parents Let's Talk Money. Sorry, my book is called Parents Let's Talk Money. I'm almost confused with my podcast. Parents Let's Talk Money. And it is a way of talking to our teenage children about money in a way that we don't feel embarrassed. We don't shy away from the conversation. We help them to learn from our experience, and we understand our own behaviors around money. My podcast is called Let's Talk Money and More. There's 204 episodes. It's in a season's break at the moment. It's been quite a long season's break, but that's because I'm going to rebrand it. But there's 204 episodes there right now. And details of how to work with me are on my website, which is themoneyconfidenceacademy.com. So hopefully that gives everybody a little bit of an understanding of where they can get more information about what I do, and who I can help, basically.
Well, that's excellent. Like I said, we'll put that in the show notes. And if today was any indication, I think your coaching would just be fantastic. And so I encourage everybody to look into that. And I want to thank you, Lesley, for your time today.
Thank
It
you.
was a little bit of a different twist on what we do, but like you say, this is the financial matters. Financial stresses are a part of health, and they affect us just as much as any other stressor. So I think this was a really great conversation. I really thank you for your time again, and maybe we'll do a part two soon. All right, and thank
Thank you
you.
very much, Richard.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all our listeners and those that are also watching the video. If you know anybody that would benefit from this information that does need a coach, please share that with them. And as always, please like and share, subscribe as well, because this is how we get information to get out there to many people. So that would be appreciated. And wishing everybody a good night. And until the next time, all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on the Integrative Continuum. I hope today's conversation gave you new insights and practical tools for your own health journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with someone who would benefit, and leave us a review. It helps us spread this message further. Until next time, I'm Dr. Richard Rocker. Stay curious, stay empowered, and keep moving forward on your path to integrative health.